can do with some Adobe tools. So we are going to go in and use a couple of different tools. If you have any questions, throw them up in the chat. I'm going to be throwing some links up in the chat. So don't hesitate to reach out if anything doesn't make sense, if you want me to go over something again, and I'll be sure to help you on your journey. If I miss it, we have some folks in the back watching the chat for me and let me know, and they're just going to throw things at me until I answer your question. So hello, all you people who are here. Hope you are all doing well as well. And same for you. Please let me know if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if anything doesn't make sense, and I'll be sure to help you on your way. So what we're going to start with today is we're going to start by talking a little bit before we get into the tools. There is something that I feel like confuses a lot of people, and I want to make sure that everybody understands this concept before we get started. Has anyone heard of roster versus vector? And that goes in the chat here or in this audience, roster and vector. No? Yes? Yeah, so we have roster and we have vector. And what you're saying is roster is pixel-based, right? And essentially vector is math-based. And when I say math, I don't mean like you have to know math to do it. The machine is doing it. It's just data, right? Instead of pixels. And what I want to start off today is just talking a little bit about that, showing the differences between that. And then we're going to do a little bit of roster and we're going to do a little bit of vector today, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with y'all watching at home. And let me get my whole screen shared. And then not show you Zoom. And what we're going to do first is we're going to come here into Photoshop. All right. And I'm going to move this down just a little bit so we can see some tools. And this is a raster image. And the way we can tell this is a raster image is if I take the zoom tool here and I zoom in really far on her head, we can start to see pixels, right? See how that's getting kind of noisy? Does everybody see that? Where it looks like pixels, it looks like noise. I always tell people to think of those pictures that your aunt shares online. I don't know why everybody's aunt doesn't know how to take a high resolution photo, but it's always like cropped too tight and there's a lot of blockiness and bad color and things like that, right? And when we have a vector, I'm getting into Illustrator really quick here. If I take this image here and I zoom in on it, I can zoom in on it forever. And it never loses quality. The lines are always crisp. The lines are always clear. So this is the difference between raster and vector. Now, a lot of times if you're doing presentations, you're doing posters, you're doing research, things like that, this is something that catches people out. I see it all the time, is that they're going and they're doing this giant poster and they take a little teeny tiny photo and they blow it up and try to print it out on a poster. What happens? It's pixelated, it's gross. You've seen this, right? I was at a conference hosted by Adobe and people did this and I'm like dying on the inside. I'm like, how in the world? This is hosted by Adobe and people are making this mistake. So we really have to be careful. We have to be thoughtful. We have to be considerate about this as we're creating content. Now, that being said, we can still use raster for larger images. If I go back to Photoshop, easy way to tell is up here at the top. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but it's image and then image size. Image and image size. And what I want you to pay attention to is right here, 9 inches, 11 inches, 300 pixels per inch. And what that's saying is 300 pixels per inch is an okay print resolution. This is something that will print out well. Some publications want this crazy high, like 14,000. So do realize they might want it larger, but 300 should print off really well. And what this is saying is at a resolution of 300, 9 by 11.97, pardon me, that this is the largest you can print it without losing quality. Now, a lot of times when you take a photo with your phone, this right here will say 72. What's going to happen if that says 72 and you try to print this off at 9 by 11? What's that? Yeah, the quality is going to be very low. So we have to be considerate of that. Okay, so if I go ahead and say, okay, I'm just going to change this to 72 really quick. And my computer is freezing for a second. Let's try that again. And I go to image size. We can see that it saved as 9 by 11 at 72. Okay. What we can do is if we have an image that's been shot with a phone, something that's coming from a research area that's not our production, we can actually check this in here. So we can say pixels. If I switch this to pixels, we can see that this is 648 by 860 pixels. So I'm going to remember that. I'm going to put that in the back of my head for a second. I'm going to say 860, height of 860. What's the height? 860. All right. So that height of 860, I'm going to remember. I'm going to crank this up to 300 because I changed this down to 72 already, right? We're imagining this is coming from our phone and it's 72. If I put this at 300, it changes all my pixel sizes. What was that height again? 860. Thank you. If I put that to 860, oop, I said 3,000. I don't want that much. That's going to be way too big. 860 and go back to inches. How big is that going to print now? 2 inches. So this is a way that you can tell if you're sizing things for print for a publication. If you crank it up, you can remember that pixel size, turn up the resolution, change the pixel size to the original pixel size, and that will keep it from getting pixelated and nasty. And it says, oh, I can only use this image 2 inches big. So this is something that a lot of people get hung up on. All right, chat doing okay? Awesome. Remember, you can throw questions up there. You can tell me to go over something again. Same for y'all. Don't be afraid to do that. I'm going to undo this a couple times, and I want to go back. So I'm getting excited. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. So what I want to do is go back just a second to what this image originally looked like. And I want to talk about this image here. And I also want to talk about where I'm getting these tools from. If I go to my web browser, I'm at creativecloud.adobe.com, and I'll throw that in the chat for y'all who are here. So I'm going to stop my share just for a second so I can get that chat up and say creativecloud.adobe.com. This is where you can download all your Adobe tools from. You'll log in with your UTSA email address. Then it will ask you for your ABC123 and passphrase, just like when you're logging into Canvas. Back to share again. And so I've logged in here. I've put Photoshop on, which is one of the tools we're going to talk about today. And I've put Illustrator. Photoshop is for raster. Illustrator is for vector. You can use raster images in Illustrator, but I always recommend checking the sizes in Photoshop first so you know how large they're going to be. All right. In Photoshop here, I have this image, and it's a headshot of, actually it's I'll tell you the truth here. It's an AI made headshot of this person. And what we're going to do is I want to show you a little bit of AI really quick. Let's say you take advantage of the headshot booth that's here on campus, right? But we are flawed. We're imperfect. Sometimes we have acne. Sometimes we have something on our face. Sometimes we're just looking rough that day, right? I won't lie to y'all. I'm 45 years old and I still have acne. I asked my mother, who is 80 years old today? I said, Mom, so when am I going to stop having acne? And she's like, I'm sorry to break this to you, son, but I still have it. You're just going to deal with it for the rest of your life. So I have to use Photoshop a lot on my headshots. And what I want to do is I want to try to clean up her skin a lot. So First off, I want to show you the wrong way. And I'm not going to lie to y'all, this is the mistake that I made when I started doing this. When I first started doing Photoshop with AI, I said, cool, I'll come up here, I'll do an elliptical marquee, I'll select her head. It gives me this option that says generative fill. I'll hit that. I'll say smooth, clear skin, hit enter, let the generation start rolling. Think about my life, have a sip of coffee. AI generation does take a minute. And put somebody else's face on her. Because with the selection, I'm selecting 100%, everything right now. 100% was selected. So I'm saying get rid of her face and add in a new face. So what I used to do is I used to do a bunch of really complex selections. When I used to do this demo, I did a bunch of complex selections. And I found through LinkedIn of all places, there's a way easier way to do this. And if I come to my third tool down, there is something called the selection brush tool. And the selection brush tool allows me to select with a brush. But the big difference here is this opacity option. Some people say opacity. I say those people are wrong. I say it's opacity. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But this opacity option here allows me to select, instead of 100%, I can change. And I have found that about 30%, if I'm wanting to keep the original person's face there, about 30% selection lets me apply AI without losing the original. And to use this, instead of drawing a circle, I just use my brush tool and I'm just drawing around her face here. And if I close that circle, it will fill that space in. I go back to generative fill, and I'm going to put in smooth, clear skin, just like I did before, and hit generate. Now, with this, I will tell you, sometimes it still does get it wrong. It's AI. Just like AI hallucinates with type, AI does some weird hallucinations sometimes with this. And you can see right here is one of them. It gave her some weird kind of like patchy, dry, weird skin here. But if we go to the next one over, we get variations. And we can choose one that looks a little bit better. I'm going to go with this one here. Now, with this, what this does is I have not destructed the original image at all. We've not taken away. We can always go back to it. And it creates what Photoshop calls a mask. What happens when you wear a mask on Halloween? It covers your face. And then what happens when you're done with Halloween? You take the mask off, and that's the glory of a Photoshop mask, is we can always take it off. A lot of people, when they do changes, they do destructive edits, things that change things permanently. This is a non-destructive edit. I'm not destroying those pixels. Remember I talked about the pixels earlier? I'm not destroying those pixels. I'm only covering them up. I'm only masking them. And what is great about that is we can see her eyes here look a little fake. I can click on that mask, and in a mask, whatever is black is hiding, whatever is white is showing. So if I switch to a black brush and hit her eyes, I can bring her original eyes back. She shows a little bit of teeth in her smile that didn't come through in AI. I can bring that back. So I can bring features back. Now, she had, like I said, a lot of acne here. So I'm going to leave that covered up pretty heavily. But for myself, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I cover up wrinkles with this as well. And when I do that, up here in my layers panel, I have an opacity option, and I'll turn that down a little bit to help blend the AI image in with the original image. So that's a way you can blend those together. Everybody doing okay so far with this? Making sense to everyone? All right, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite shortcuts. Control minus. If you're on a Mac, it's Command minus. And that allows me to zoom out. Control minus zooms out. Control plus zooms in. Command minus, Command plus if you're on a Mac. And you can see here that's cut off a little strange where her shirt is, right? What if I wanted to make this a bigger canvas? Up here at the top, remember I went to image size before. I also have image canvas size. So image canvas size is just like if we had a canvas for a painting. If I needed to make that canvas bigger to put more paint on it, I could do that here. I could say image canvas size, and I can increase the pixels. So I can say I want this to be 4,500 by 4,500 and say okay. And we see here that that increased the size around the piece. If I click back on that background layer, I'm going to go to my 1, 2, 3, 4th tool down, magic wand. If you don't see it, if you are ever missing one of the tools, you can click and hold and get that tool. Magic wand tool is what I'm looking for. I'm going to select that background. And then I need to move zoom out of the way here. I have this option down here for generative fill. Last time I hit that and I said smooth, clear skin, right? What do you suppose happens if I leave this blank? If I leave it blank, it tries to guess at what I want based on the pixels around the selection. So if I hit generate with a blank background, it will try to guess what that background looks like. Now, I had a lot of fun with this when I first found out about it. I took a photo of myself in my office and I kept expanding and expanding and expanding and creating fake backgrounds. And here you can see that it's created a couple of different backgrounds for her. If I wanted to, I could, I'm not going to worry about it, but I could blend that in more. You can see there's a little bit of a halo there around where the transition happens. I could blend that in a little bit more. I'm going to leave that be for right now. But you can see that I've made that canvas much larger. And this is really handy if you have an image that's too tight. One of the other ways I use this is if I'm creating content for trainings and I need a place for type and the image is too small to add type, I can make that image larger to add type to the image. All right, last thing I want to do here before we get into vectors is I actually want to give her some more professional looking clothing. Because right now her clothing is it's not great. Not really professional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go second tool down, or I'm sorry, third tool down. And I'm going to go and click and hold and go to polygonal lasso. And polygonal is fun. You just go click, 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 and then close it up. Generative fill option, just like we had before. And I'm going to put in a professional blouse. Let it generate. And think about this too. Let's say you need to produce an image going back to that pixel size and resolution, and it's a little bit too short. That's another great place for generative fill to come in. Make your image a little bit larger. That's a little bit weird for the professional blouse. That one's not bad. These ones are okay. I got this properties window over here. And what I can do, if I don't like any of these options, I can hit generate again, and it will keep generating variations, and I can go through those variations. So if you ever have a problem with a generation, you can come over here in that properties window and keep generating out variations. And oh, that's so much better looking. That's nice looking. I'm going to go with this one. It's a really nice looking, piece right there, I think. And boom, I have made a layered piece with AI that's I can use for professional headshot. Now, this could be used for a multitude of different reasons, but this is one of the things that might help you in your career. Does anybody have any questions about this? Yes.
So what if it's clothing and it's hard to describe it. Brain definitely notices some things.
Right. So if you don't like how that generation looks, you can do a couple of things. One thing you can do is you can go in and do that opacity adjustment that I was talking about earlier. You can also adjust your selection. So like I went around and just really roughly selected her. If I go tighter to her body, then it's going to be a closer selection to her, the shape of her body. One of the problems that I run into is I have broad shoulders, and AI always tries to give me narrow shoulders. I don't know why. So I have to be very careful about how I select my shoulders when I'm doing AI generations. Yes. So we will do her hair. I will tell you this right now, that I did this demo 2 weeks ago and it worked flawlessly. I've done this demo in my office practicing it and it didn't work. So hair is still a little funky, I think. What I'm going to actually do now, sometimes when I'm generating, I like to put all my layers together. So what I might do, something I like to do, if I'm getting close to the end, I might do layer, and I'm going to select all these layers, and I'm going to where is it? Merge layers. So I just did a selection of all the layers. Control E, Command E is a shortcut, merge them all together, just for ease for this part of the demo. I'm going to do the same thing, polygonal lasso roughly around her hair. I'm going to give her longer hair. Generative fill. I'm going to say professional, stylish haircut. We're going to try that out and see. Again, this has been 50-50 for me. I've had times where it generates really well, and I've had times where it doesn't generate really well. I will say for me, with not having any hair, it does not know what to do, and it gives me really bad hair. But this isn't too bad. I would do some cleanup around the edges here where the haloing's happening, but that's pretty good. That's pretty professional looking. I think that works. So, going back to that question earlier about it looking a little bit like AI, yeah, you have to do a little bit of Photoshop tweaking to make it look more realistic. But the thing that you're going to realize if you start looking at any image, this is a discussion I've had a multitude of times, is every image you've looked at in a catalog, online, and advertisement, it's all been retouched. You know, going back in the day when they did it with airbrushing, if you want to go back even further, painting. If you look at portraits for wedding portraits, right, where they're trying to marry off princes and princesses, those are all painted to make the person look more beautiful. So we've been doing this forever. Now, there is one thing I do want to mention that kind of relates to your question, and that is ethics, right? Is this ethical in what we're doing here? I think, you know, as long as you're not going too far with it, I think it's fine. If you're not going to that original one where we took and put somebody else's head on there, right? That's not really ethical. The other thing that's really ethical about Adobe AI is they're not pulling their sources from the web. A lot of your Dollies and your Midjourneys, your Copilots are all pulling from random sources on the web, including artists' websites. What Adobe does is it pulls from Adobe stock, and those images that are used, the artists have given the rights to use the image, and the artists get compensated for the use of their image. So there is a compensation to that. The other category is pieces of art that Adobe owns outright, that they have purchased for use in this. So as far as ethics and AI go, this is one of the most ethical tools that I've personally found because it's not just borrowing from other sources. All right, any other questions before we move into Illustrator? Everybody good? All right, I'm gonna jump into Illustrator now. And what I want to talk about here in Illustrator, got to get some of these tools for zoom out of the way here, is how we can create some content for presentations, for posters and things like that. Because you're probably like me. And I say this all the time, I'm an artist, I'm a digital artist. But I am not the kind of artist that I can grab a pencil and sit there and draw something, right? Like, it is not my skill set. My skill set is taking a photo and manipulating a raster photo. So when I get an Illustrator where I'm drawing, it's not necessarily something that my brain wraps around. What I want to show y'all is how you can work from a raster photo to make a vector. So here in Illustrator, again, that's available from that creativecloud.adobe.com. If I go to new file, I can do a print file in different sizes here. I'm just going to stick to a typical 8.5 by 11. Now, I'm a terrible American, so I think in inches, but we have all kinds of different sizes in here. So if you want to think in millimeters, centimeters, meters, if you want to think in pixels, if you're doing something on the screen, if you want to work in picas for whatever reason, you can do that, or picas. I say Pika's because Pikachu. But anyway, I'm going to work in inches, and I'm going to leave all the rest of these settings the same. Create. And this gives me a blank canvas. In Illustrator, what we can think of, I'm going to move some of these tools out of the way really quick. What we think of is almost like a piece of paper. If I zoom out, and it's the same Control Command minus, we have a piece of paper on a desktop. And if I draw on a piece of paper on this desktop here, what I draw is only going to appear on the piece of paper, right? If I draw on my desktop over here and then hand that paper into you, what are you going to see? The piece of paper, right? You're not going to see what I drew on my desk. So this area, this gray area, is kind of like your work area. Not saying that you should draw on your desk. Please don't do that. But it is your place to sort of draw on your desk and make some notes for yourself and things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File and Place. If I need to bring in a raster image, File, Place. I have a pencil right here, and I want to illustrate that. Remember what I was saying earlier? We can use raster-based images inside of here, right? But when we bring it in, when we hit place, it gives us this weird little thing. Adobe calls it the gun. And the gun lets us do one of two things. If I click and drag, I can make this image whatever size I want. If I click once, it makes it the printable size. So if you're in here and you don't want to go back into Photoshop and you're like, oh, I don't want to go through all that, checking the size and stuff. Remember, we're on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper right here, regular piece of paper. If I click once, it will give me the printable size. So if I click once, oh my goodness, this thing will print giant. Look at how huge that is. That will print well. If I'm doing a poster, this image would print really well on that poster. I'm going to undo that. Zoom back in. Now, if I go to File, Place, again, go back to my pencil, Place, and click and drag, that allows me to size it. The thing to be careful about that click and drag, I usually click once, and then I click and drag to make sure my image is not too small. If I'm clicking it and dragging it beyond the size that it should go, it's going to be pixelated when I print it out. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Now, what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to talk. Let me get the Zoom stuff out of the way. I'm going to start to talk about layers. And layers, the reason I wore this hat today, it says, name your layers, because this is something you need to get in the habit of doing. If I double click on here, I'm going to call this ref. Sorry, that popped up, keeps popping up for that Zoom stuff. And it says ref for reference image. That's what I use that name for, reference image. And this is my reference image. This is what I'm going to be drawing from. Right here, there's an eyeball that turns it off and on. And there's a blank space. If I click in that blank space, that will lock that layer. I can no longer move this. It's stuck. Why do you suppose I did that? Because it's fun. Because it's educational. Chat, let's see, chat's going. So you don't lose it. That's a good, that's close. That's close. So it doesn't get resized or moved. I'm using this as a reference. I'm gonna trace over this, y'all. I'm gonna make a vector version of this pencil really quick. Okay. So I'm gonna make a new layer. And what I want to do is start to break this down and think about this as different parts to a layer. If I look at this pencil, there's the lead, the wood, and the body of the pencil. If I want to be more complex, I could say there's the shading for the body of the pencil too. Now let's turn this into an illustration really quickly, okay? So first one, I'm going to say, I'm just going to call this tip. I'm going to go down here. Third tool down is my pen tool. My pen tool, if I go click, 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 I can make shapes. But if I click and drag, I can make curves. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and click and drag. So What a lot of people try to do when they first get in to make a curve is they go click, 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 and they have 50 different points. What's going to happen if you need to edit those points? Every single one of them. Your mission is, if you choose to accept it, is, yeah, mess. I was in the chat, mess. If you choose to accept it, is to do this in a few points as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it larger because my next layer is going to cover up this piece. So I'm going to go click. This curves at the tip, click and drag, click, and then close it off. Right now, this is white with a black stroke. If I click on this black stroke, down here's a teeny tiny little red slash. If I click that, it takes the stroke off of there. If I go back to this white and double click, I can turn that to like a black or like a dark gray, kind of like pencil lead, right? If I zoom in on this, I can see, oh, that doesn't match up. I messed up. Got to give it up. Go home. I ruined it. No, I can edit it. I have two arrows, the selection arrow, which selects the whole shape, or the direct select. The direct select allows me to click on a point and adjust just that point. I can adjust the tip. I can adjust the curve. I can adjust all those little pieces. All right, let's do it again. I'm going to do another layer. I'm going to call this wood. And guess what? I'm going to hide that tip layer for a second. I just want to focus on the wood part. And if I want to get that color straight on that, check this out. I can use this little eyedropper and get the wood color right from the piece. All right, pen tool, just like I did before. Click. And then I want to make that curve where the wood curves there. Click, click, and drag. Click and drag. This doesn't have to be perfect. No one's going to see your original piece, right? Click, and then close it out. And then if I bring that back, we can start to see how we're making a pencil. Okay, pretty easy. Let's do that 2 more times. Next layer. I'm just going to call this body, for body of the pencil. I'm going to hide that wood layer. Do that same trick. I'm going to eyedrop the shadows here. Click, click, click and drag, click and drag. Try and make those curves. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. Back up to the top. Close it out. Bring the wood back. And it's not perfect. What do? Back down. And I can grab those points. Remember the white arrow, direct select. Oh, got the whole thing. Let me undo that real quick. Go. And then I can adjust that. So it comes out a little bit, maybe move that point over. And then I'm going to move this point down just a hair. And if I wanted to, technically, I could stop right there, right? But I'm going to do another layer. I call it highlight. Again, I'm naming my layers. Because what's going to happen is you're going to end up having like 50, 100 layers. And if you don't name them, you're going to get lost. I used to have a really bad habit. I used to call my layers proper names. So it'd be like Steve and Francesco and Julio and all this. I don't know why I did that, but that was what I used to do. And it got really confusing. Really, I was like, what is Steve again? I don't remember. I'm going to hide that body layer. I'm going to do my highlight, eyedrop, and then pen tool. Make sure I have that highlight layer back on. Do the same thing, and I want to hide that wood layer so I can see the shape. And then make my curve, click and drag to make your curve, click and drag to make your curve, back up to the top, close it off. And again, I would need to come in and adjust that little point there, but that's okay. I can always come back with my direct select. And again, no one's going to see the original pencil. Doesn't matter if it's perfect. Boom. I have made an illustration of a pencil in a very short amount of time. Now, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. When's a time you might have to be perfect? If someone saw the original, if it's a scientific image, I'll give you a real, actual, real world time where I had to be very specific about my Illustrator points. I worked on a publication. A gentleman was writing a book about squatters' rights in Brazil, and it had a bunch of maps, and he asked me to illustrate the maps for him. I had to be very, very precise on getting the points right on the map so they're real, realistic points on a map. That was very hard. But if you're just doing a pencil, very easy. And like I said, this is a simple pencil, but this could be any element that you want to represent on a poster. And the thing to remember about this is I can take this pencil now. If I wanted to put this on a billboard, I could put it on a billboard. If I wanted to put this on the side of a bus, if I wanted to put this on the moon, it will never, ever lose quality. So that's what's really handy about using Illustrator for illustrations. All right. Any questions before we move on to the next part? Now I want to show you guys how to cheat. So let's cheat for a second. I'm going to check the chat. Looks like we're good. I want to show you how to cheat in Illustrator a little bit. So if I go to express or new.express.adobe.com, I'm going to throw this in the chat as well. Let me bring the chat back up. Chat, where did you go? There we are. new.express.adobe.com. And new.express, has anyone in here used Express before? I see one hand up. Anyone in here use Canva? No? Okay. So Express is an online tool that you can use for creating graphics, great for social media, great for presentations, great for if you need to make a simple graphic in a hurry. I love it. It's quickly replacing Photoshop. I hate to say it. Photoshop's always been my love. And it's quickly replacing Photoshop for me as a tool that I go to when I need something in a hurry. What I'm going to show you today is how you can use content from here as a vector. To get started, anytime you're getting started in Express, it's a big purple plus button up here. I logged in the same way. UTSA email address, ABC123 and passphrase. Purple plus. I'm just going to do a square shape. And in here, there's a whole bunch of options, but what I want to look at is down here called elements. And hiding in elements, this is kind of hidden. So I go down to elements, I hit this little arrow over here, and I want to go to icons. And in icons, I can type in different things. So if I go in here and I say, for example, a beaker, it gives me icons of a beaker, right? If I need this for something I'm working on, I can take this, put it over here. I can resize this. And right now, the way we're working, because we're online, we're in this tool, this is a raster image right now, raster image. But because I'm using icon, this only works for icons. I can go to download and choose to download this as a PDF for print. If I choose to download this as a PDF for print, it turns it into a vector. Boom. Download. Take a minute to process. Go back to Illustrator, File, Open. I'm going to go to my Downloads folder. I have my untitled download right here because I never gave it a title. Boom, it's right there. And if I click on it, we can see it has all points. So all that work that I just did with the pencil, you can do it if you have something that is very specific that you need to do. But if you just need a pencil, you could go and get a graphic of a pencil and do it with this. You can come in here and select different parts of the shape and change the color. Like, let's make this kind of a green chemical here. I can go in and do that. I probably wouldn't use that color green. It's not great. But I can go in and modify this, right? Really handy, really great trick that you can use. Now, one thing I do want to show you that has caught me out in the past, I do not know why it does this. When you bring that in from Express, it brings in a solid white background. So if you need this to be on a transparent background, you just have to delete that out. I just hit the delete key and it's gone. But that has caught me out in the past where I'm like, why isn't this transparent? I can't figure, oh, there's a solid white behind it. Let's do another trick with that. Go back over, I'm going to go back in. I'm just going to delete this out. I need kind of a simple shape now. I'm going to use this simple kind of beaker here. Blow this up. Download this again. PDF best for printing, download. Takes a minute to process. Have a sip of coffee. It was too fast for me to even get my sip of coffee. Man, back into Illustrator, file, open, untitled number 2. Boom, right there. I'm going to make this even simpler. I'm going to get rid of this white box. If I use my direct select, remember that white arrow, I can click on that anchor point there. I'm just hitting delete once, delete twice. Now it's just the shape. I need a super simple shape. But what if I wanted to make this super simple shape more complex? I'm going to select it. I'm going to go ahead and give this kind of a glassy kind of color, roughly kind of a blue gray-y color. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just something like that. Here we have that same menu that came up in Photoshop when we were doing AI. Now this is in beta. It's going to be a little bit slower. It's not 100% perfect. I'm going to go to Gen Shape Fill and say green. Keep with a green theme. Green, bubbling, liquid. And I'll just say, let's just try green bubbling and hit generate. Thinks about it. Once again, get a little bit of coffee. Actually, it's not like coffee. It's mediocre coffee, but even mediocre coffee is good, right? All right, let it process for a minute. Boom. Then what I want to do is that original background, I might want to try to match that up. You can see there's a little bit of a gray color up here. I'm going to eyedrop that gray color so it matches up perfectly. And guess what, y'all? That's all vector. That is all vector. I can blow that up. I can put it on the side of a bus. No problems, no quality losses. Again, if you're doing a postering session, something like that, and you need a high quality graphic, you can do it with AI. All right, so that is super handy. Let's say you need to do it from scratch. You can also do that. I'm going to do File, New, just like I did before. Leave it at print. I'm going to leave it at inches because I'm a terrible American. And go in, and I'm just going to make a box. Oh, this means something. This is my artistic piece. This is my vision. I'm going to start doing, have you all seen the guy with the duct tape banana? Have you heard about this? Where there's an artist who sold as a duct tape to the wall banana. He doesn't sell the piece. He sells the rights to use to use duct tape on a banana in your house. $1 million and people are buying it. I'm going to do this with a white box. Anyway, what I'm going to do, same thing, generate vectors. If I come in here and generate vectors, I can describe what I want. Now, I want to show you something really quick that's a trick in here that's easy to miss. Right next to this, there's content type. So we can have a scene, a subject, and an icon. We have 3 different options in here for this, depending on what you're looking for. Where did you get to generate vector? Okay, I'll start that over for you again. I'm going to delete that box. I'm in Illustrator. All I did was make a lovely square. It gives me the generate vectors option right here. And for this first demo, I'm going to do subject. All right. And for that subject, I'm going to put in an actual real request that I got. Someone was doing a poster talking about drone deliveries. They were doing their research on drone deliveries. So I'm going to say drone delivering package. And it's going to process again. This is a little slow because it's in beta right now. It will speed up. This is about how fast the beta was in Photoshop as well. So when it got out of beta, the speed went up quite a bit. Also, this is in beta, so sometimes you do get some weird generations. I've gotten some very strange things that have come through here, but this looks really nice. Again, all vectors. If I go in here, I'm going to close out some of these. I have too many panels open. We can see that we have properties just like we had in Photoshop, and I can change between different variations. I could hit generate again. And with these, let's say I don't like these little kind of graphics down here. I could go into direct select, click on them, hit the delete key, and I could start to remove these elements because these are all vectors. So I can get rid of them. I'm not going to sit there and delete everything. I don't bore y'all like that, but we can modify these vectors. So going back to the reason I showed you, you might be like, well, why did you show me the pencil? Why do I need to know about the pencil? Well, in that pencil, we talked about modifying vectors, right? Even if you're using AI, you need to know how to modify them and to make it look like you want it to look. So that helps you out with that. All right, so I'm going to delete that out real quick. We're going to do that from the top one more time. Make my shape. Doesn't matter what the background color is, generate vectors. And I'm going to stick to drone delivering a package. I'm going to go to scene. And I can tell it where on a college campus. So if I use scene and give it a location, it'll automatically do it. So it's really handy if you need to be in a specific place. Now, if I don't put in a place, it does two things, one of two things for whatever reason. I don't know why. It either generates it in a farm field or generates it in the mountains. But here I told it campus, so it's on a college campus. And boom. Again, think about it. You're doing something like a poster really easy. The one thing I will say that I don't really like, the one tool that I don't really like in here is the generative shape. I'm just going to go back to drone delivering a package. I'm going to take off on a college campus. Come on. My mouse is being funky. I'm sorry. All right, I'm going to type it all out. There we go. Drone package. And I'm going to go to the icon option. Now, honestly, for icon, I prefer doing that trick from Express because when I hit generate on this, I feel like these icons come out too simplistic. I don't like them. Again, this is in beta. It's probably going to get better, but right now what they produce is it's just not my favorite. Maybe you like it. Maybe it works well for whatever you're working on. But for me and the research that I do, it's not great. I mean, it's okay. It's not great. All right. Any questions about that? Everybody doing okay? All right. So let's look in the chat here. No questions. All right, good. We're going to do one last thing using Express. And that is with data. So if I go back to Express and I get rid of the shape, I'm just going to delete it out. There is another trick that I love to use here in Express. And that is if I'm trying to make my data pretty. Charts and grids. I go to charts and grids. I can build charts, tables, and grids in Express. And I'm going to go to charts. And I'm just going to produce something very quick. I'm just going to do a very simple pie chart here. And I'm not even going to change. I can come in here. I can give it an item name. I can give it a value name. I can put all my data in there, put my whole data set into that. I'm going to keep it as it is just to show you this trick. All right. Same trick. Download. PDF for print. Download. Wait for it to download. Back here into Illustrator. File. Open. Set untitled 3. I should be titling my stuff. I'm bad about it. Oh no, it gives me a problem. All it's saying is that the font that was coming from Express isn't on my computer for some reason. Whenever you see this pink here in Illustrator, it means it's just missing a font. Now, we could activate the font or we can replace the font. Activating the font sometimes takes a minute. Since we're almost at the end of the demo, I'm just going to replace the font really quick and choose a different font. I'll do change all. And so I can change those fonts in there. But again, they are fonts and I can change that number manually if I need to. Again, if I need to go in, do my direct select, click an element of this. If I wanted to change that color, I could go in and modify it right here. I can still modify it. Or let's make it even easier. If I select all my colors, oop, I got that white background again, hit that delete. If I select all my shapes here, what I'm going to do is go to this little tiny color wheel here. Hit that. And I have the ability to change it through the color wheel, just spinning the color wheel if I wanted to. Or I can use AI recoloring and just put in, maybe I want it to be kind of crazy looking. I'm just going to hit this one option here. I could type it in and boom, AI is recoloring this for me based on what I want. So I can use AI to recolor my data as well. Let's say that you are using some specific tool that you've built to get data. You're doing something in Python, you're programming it, it's coming out. If you get something that's like, let me go back to my desktop really quick. Session here. I have an SVG. A lot of us are getting SVGs for our data, right? Yes, 5 minutes, gotcha. Open that up. It's going to say that there's a problem with the font, that's okay. But boom, there's my data in Illustrator. And if I look at this, I can select that as my points, just like I did before, if it's an SVG. Now there is one big difference here. Look at these fonts, see how crazy they look? Can anyone tell me why that looks crazy? Any guesses? No guesses? Okay, since we're running out of time. Oh, I see a guess in the chat. Let me check that out. They're all points, exactly. So when this came in from the SVG, it didn't bring the fonts over. It turned them into points. So if I wanted to change the type on it, I would have to manually do that. Because if I try to do that now, if I zoom in on this November 6th task, for example, and click on it, it's just points. It's just pieces of data. It's just vectors. And so it's a situation where it would not allow me to modify that by type. I would have to modify the vectors. So do realize that's a limitation. But with that, we are almost out of time. So I want to answer any questions that folks might have here in the room or in the chat online. Yes. Yes, so that's a great question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to good old YouTube. And if you go to YouTube and you type in UTSA Academic Innovation, you'll find the Academic Innovation channel. Every week during the semester, I post a new video. It's a great place to go. In the chat, anyone you'd suggest for additional videos outside of me? If you like Photoshop, I really love the Photoshop channel on YouTube. If you just type in, I'm pretty sure it's called the Photoshop channel. I actually know this guy. I met him at a conference, and yeah, Photoshop training channel. That's what it is. Photoshop training channel. And he is awesome. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to autoplay stuff at you. He is awesome. He is like he is who I go to and like watch what he does and my jaws on the floor trying to figure out how to do it. So definitely worth checking out if you want something. And I tell people this, like, if you don't like me, if you didn't like this training, you don't like my voice, that's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Different people react well to different instructors, right? We know that. There's going to be an instructor that I love that you don't love. There's going to be an instructor that you love that I don't love. It's just the reality of how humans get along. So if you didn't like what I'm saying, go and research it. The other thing you can do, if you're in any of these tools, let me close out some of these things. I want to show you a really neat pro tip. Close it out, close it out, close it all out. Do-do-do. When I'm in this home screen, I have Learn right here, and there's tutorials built right into every single Adobe tool. You just have to go to that Learn tab. So if you want to do something right inside the tool, And it tells you about how long. This says 17 minutes. This one takes 23. It tells you about how long it takes to do those different ones. And I like your training. Glad to know you have a channel. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I'll take your lies all day long. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, please do. The other thing I'll say, you can reach out to me. I'll throw this in the chat. William.Schaefer at utsa.edu. So William.Schaefer, I have cards. If anyone here in person wants a card, I'll give it to you. You can reach out to me. I always tell people you can email me at 3 a.m. Just don't expect a reply at 3 a.m. And I'll be happy to help you on your Adobe journey. If you don't have any questions, so that's all I have for today. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Y'all want me to close out the Zoom session?
No,
Okay.
no, please don't exit.
Oh, I heard please don't exit.
Yeah, we have a survey